I wrote up this great reason, for why I would be a great PhD candidate. And the person who reviewed that was like, "This is awesome." She's like, "We'll definitely consider that next year." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean for next year?" And she's like, "Well, this year's another PhD." And I was like, "Online, the document says this." And she was like, "Well, we changed it, and I guess no one updated the document."
Dan, my man, how are you? Welcome to the Point of Impact.
Morning, Aaron. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's gonna be a fun one because you and I have known each other for a while. We're in the same mastermind, from military to millionaire warrior. We've talked multiple times about deals, about what's going on in our lives, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to share with the Point of Impact audience about what it's like going from military to kind of transitioning into the civilian world, and
Mm.
I want to showcase your story, tell everybody about what you've been up to. The first question is, how was that anniversary trip to Switzerland?
It was good. So we lived in Germany. This is a bit of the backstory. So we lived in Germany. I was stationed at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center for about four
Mm-hmm.
and a half years, and Switzerland became our favorite country. It was about a 4.5 hour drive, so we would drive even on Friday night and come back Sunday night, and we just loved it. And so we've been back in the States now for about 3 years, and so we just wanted to go back and get some more Switzerland. So yeah, it was
Right.
awesome. We hit
And
all our
Jessica
favorite
enjoyed
spots.
it.
Yep, we did. And my son Luke, he's 5 now, and he actually would hike about 2 to 3 miles every hike, which is great because otherwise it's me hauling him up the mountain. So it's getting better.
So, Landstuhl, that's a joint base, or is that's the Army, isn't it?
It's
And you are a Marine, correct?
well, actually, I'm an Army officer.
Army officer. Okay, wait a second.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought,
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Uh, I have to change all of my jokes I had planned. Um,
Sorry. I still eat crayons sometimes, but only when I'm really hungry.
uh, so, um, so for an Army physical therapist, and so when a soldier comes in and needing to have feeling pain or whatever, the Army answer is a vitamin M from Motrin and suck it up.
That does tend to be what happens. I like to think we're getting better.
Um,
If only.
I
Yeah.
did get to spend 24 hours in Landstuhl, just passing through on my way to Walter Reed. Funny story there. I got to meet Tom Cruise. It was the weirdest thing.
Huh,
Yeah, I flew
that's
from
crazy.
Afghanistan, flew into Landstuhl, and the nurse there said I was being wheeled to the plane, that big medical
Yep.
transport aircraft. Um, and as I'm being, prepared to get wheeled out on the tarmac, the nurse says, "Hey, you want to meet Tom Cruise?" I'm like, "I know I just got blown up, but I don't think I'm, I don't think I'm that TBI'd." Uh, and she goes, "No,
Can't pin
no,
that down.
this is 2011. He was promoting his latest Mission Impossible movie, and he came by to, shake hands." So I met him, and I swear, I'm lying on that gurney, and my eardrums were blown out, but it really sounded like he he was on the side of the bed and he was talking to me face to face. I'm like, "Man, you are short." Well, anyways, uh,
That's pretty awesome.
so you had a
Uh,
great anniversary. That sounds like a lot of fun. Um, but tell me, okay, so uh, what 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 are the events that brought you, led you towards military service? Let's start back there.
Yeah, so way back in 2006, I had just graduated college with a degree in sports medicine, and I was getting a master's in sports medicine at the University of Virginia. And while I was doing my master's, there was a guy in the PhD program, and he was active duty Navy. And when I met him, it just blew me away. I had no idea that you could be active duty Navy and getting your PhD. And so I talked to him, and he was a Navy physical therapist. And so he told me about the Army Baylor Doctor of Physical Therapy program, is what it's called at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. And so I just kept that in the back of my mind, and I kept in touch with him. And about 2 years later, I was kind of burned out with my job, and I'd always wanted to go to physical therapy school. And at that time, my brother was serving as a Marine, and my cousin, who's my same age, he had enlisted in the Army right out of high school. And so I kind of had both of those people in my life. And again, this is 2008, 9 right now. So the wars were going pretty heavy at that point, and it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of around that surge time. And so it was just really heavy on my mind. And I thought if I could go to physical therapy school and get a free doctor of physical therapy degree and serve, that would be awesome. And so I decided to join and I got in. So I started the DPT program is what I'll call it in 2010. And then I finished in 2013. And then I spent active duty from 2000, well, as a licensed physical therapist from 2013 till 2021 at a few different duty stations. So it was a great experience and I did love it.
So, yeah, it was a rewarding job. You enjoyed it, and you got to spend some time overseas. That's great. Uh, was it was it what you thought it would be? Was it more or less?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I always tell people now the same advice that one of my professors told me. When I did join, I had a 7 year obligation. And so my plan was to get the degree for free, do 4 years, and then peace out. But one of my professors told us that that was her plan like 20 years before. And one of her mentors told her to give the military a chance. And as long as it was good, the military will take care of you, do your best, contribute. And if it's ever not the right fit, then at that point to move on. And so I really took that to heart. And, my first couple duty stations were Fort Hood, Texas, and then Fort Polk, Louisiana. Those are both some of the worst posts to be on in the military from everything I hear, and I can vouch for that. But I loved it, and I really enjoyed being with a brigade combat team. Definitely one of the highlights of my career, and then deploying with them. And so I just kind of kept giving the military that next chance, and that brought us to Launch School Germany. And Germany was a great experience, very different than the line units, but it was awesome in another way, and it was great quality of life and the ability to travel. It was just so good. And so, but then I did reach that point when we were in Germany. I was actually on a deployment, and I had been deployed on a very short notice. So I think I had 26 days from the point I found out about the deployment to the time I landed in or I left Germany. Um, and that was and my wife was pregnant at the point. It was at that time, it was our first child, and he was going to be due in April, and this was October. And so my local leadership had worked out that we could split the deployment in half with another physical therapist from Vicenza. She had not deployed and she wanted to deploy, but she had just had a baby, so she couldn't cover the first half of the deployment. So it was going to work out perfectly where I could cover the first 5 months, she could cover the second 5 months, and then, she would be home while her baby was that little, and I would be home when my son was born. Well, I don't know if I'm not going to get too specific on who, but a certain colonel from not the army denied my request to split the deployment and return early. And so, like that very next day, I was on a helicopter flying out to some little outpost in eastern Afghanistan. And I was reading the book, The Simple Path to Wealth. And in the book, J.L. Collins talks an awful lot about sabbaticals throughout his life. And it just hit me like we've always been aggressive savers and investors. I've always been very frugal just naturally. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't, I don't need to be here right now. Like, I shouldn't be in Afghanistan while my pregnant wife is about to have a baby, and I'm going to miss that. And so it was kind of that point where the light bulb went off, and I was like, man, that's what it means to be financially independent. So to make a longer story a little bit shorter, I was able to kind of pull a string actually, and I've never done that in my life, but I kind of talked to someone else who made something happen, and I made it back for the birth of my son, and I will never regret that all the days of my life. And so it was just that experience, though. That was one of those times where I started thinking about those words about, give the military a chance, and as long as it's good, keep going. I just realized that while I did love it, and my mission was to serve those who serve us, and that was very rewarding. But there was also a huge component of burnout to that. And when I started to feel like I didn't have full control over my life to live it the way I wanted to, that's when I really started thinking it's probably time to exit the military. And then fortunately, I had another passion, which was the financial side of things. And so I had been blogging about financial independence at that point and kind of morphed into an investing blog for financial independence. And so I just was naturally teaching people about that. I was leading classes for the soldiers on deployment. I was leading classes for my coworkers at Launch Stool. And I just thought this would be perfect if I could make a clean break from the military, go to the reserves, finish up my career, and then transition to becoming an independent financial planner. And so it just gave me a lot of benefits of like independence, control over my time. I work from home now. So I saw my son before the podcast. I'll see him after the podcast and we'll play. It's awesome now. So I'm very grateful for my time in the military and what it provided me with. And I am still in the reserves, so I still do want to go after the 20 years and, get the reserve pension and lock in TRICARE at some point. But, I love the flexibility that I have as well.
The military, there are so many benefits nowadays for service members besides, we get into retirement and having the pension, but from tuition assistance to the VA loan, GI Bill, and TSP, there's such a long list of incredible benefits. Of course, the pay isn't great, but then again, you get healthcare, dental, housing, all, in insurance, more or less, taken care of.
Yeah.
It's a great idea for many people. It's not for everybody. And it's a good outlook to have to, use it like any other job, serve, get what you need out of it the best you can. And when it no longer serves you the way, you want to grow, then you find another path or plan, to exit. And I think, what you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, you're right. I mean, some people, they get that, do their 4 years or 6 years or whatever, and they get out. I love, for me, the original plan was 4 and out. And then 14 years later, and then I had to get blown up to leave. But there are a lot of people who say, you get in, stay in, do full 20, and just because. And you should never do anything just because. Because that's the best plan for many and might not be the best plan for all. It's definitely not the best plan for all. So, you start on this path from physical therapy to financial planning and helping serve others in another one of your passions. Tell me about this transition, how you started to get your certification and planning the transition, because you didn't just say, finish your active time and hang up the uniform. Which I know a lot of people leave the military, leave the service without a plan. they're in the TAPS class going, I don't know what I'm doing next. I better get a good resume. And that's a no plan is a terrible plan. So
Yeah.
how did you plan this out?
Well, it was definitely a process. I think, like you said, a lot of people who are in the military, especially I think if their parents served, I think they view the military like 20 years or nothing. And I think that especially with the blended retirement system being rolled out back in 2018, I think that was a really good move for the military because I think it'll make it easier for people to leave the military and feel like they're still taking a piece of a retirement pie with them that they've built up over the years that they were in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we'll see is I think we'll see more higher quality, devoted people to the military staying in. And I think we'll see some of those people who are more marginal maybe leaving because they have some financial benefit to leave and take with them. So I think that was good. But yeah, that there was that point when I was struggling with not being able to return home for the birth of my son. And I just, I know so many people have sacrificed so much more than me, you being an easy example of that since I'm talking to you right now. But even people missing the birth of their kids or whatever it is, going through relationship struggles while overseas, I realize that I feel like my cost was so small. But for me, it was a big thing to miss the birth of my son. And but it wasn't easy. Like that was really hard because I had adopted that 20-year mindset and I was planning out, my career. I was planning out my plan for making '04 and then '05 and then potentially '06. I didn't know at that point, if I'd want to stay, but I was planning that all out and I liked the guarantees that the military provides. But it really just became this slow decision of the freedom and flexibility at some point grew larger than the desire for the safety net of the military. And so that was a slow process. I immediately felt that desire for the freedom, but then what does this look like? What would entrepreneurship look like? That was a little bit more scary and unknown. But like you said, I did take my time. So it was early 2019 when I had that epiphany of like, this is what financial independence is about. It's time to jump ship and go. But I returned from the deployment. We stayed in Germany. COVID hit. And then during COVID, I applied for a 1-year extension where I applied for a PhD program. And that was kind of my last straw to stay in the military. It was something I always wanted to do. But in true military fashion, the PhD list that had been uploaded to MilConnect was wrong. So I applied for a PhD based on the year group that I would have gone. I wanted to get a PhD in biomechanics. And so I lined my time up in Germany perfectly to go straight from Germany to a PhD program. And then I would go to San Antonio and become a professor at the schoolhouse. And in true military fashion, I sent in my application. I wrote up this great reason, for why I would be a great PhD candidate. And the person who reviewed that was like, this is awesome. She's like, we'll definitely consider that next year. And I was like, well, what do you mean for next year? And she's like, well, this year's another PhD. And I was like, online, the document says this. And she was like, well, we changed it. And I guess no one updated the document. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm not going to PCS somewhere, spend 2 years time on station, and then go get a PhD when I'm at like 16 years of service. And so I was, there was that. And then there was one more thing that it just gave me closure. I was like, I'm getting burned out with the patient care, the patients that fulfill me and that I feel like I'm making a massive difference in their life. Those were getting to be farther and fewer between. And it was more of the complaining, more of the whining. And so I just decided, like, I've been doing this financial blog. I love teaching people. I always thought I'd go into education with the PhD. But what I realized is like I can do financial education. And I was really enjoying helping people and kind of coaching them through my blog and then just again the classes I would lead. So it just became natural. It's like I'm going to become a CFP, a certified financial planner, and then help people with their finances. And so that probably around 2020 became my for sure strategy of I'm going to do this. And then we spent until the fall of 2021 in Germany. So we hit the travel pretty hard. We enjoyed it. I kind of finished out everything I wanted to do military wise. And then I was preparing myself a little bit for the financial transition and getting connected with some of the great people. So I always make plugs for Military Financial Advisors Association. It's a great group of fee only financial planners who are all fiduciaries. And so they're all veterans or have experience or married to a vet or service member. And so great group, but I connected with them and they helped me see that there is a way to do financial planning the way I wanted to do it, which was independent and then fee only, which means I don't sell commission products. So I'm not an
Mm-hmm.
insurance salesman and I don't sell investments. And I think those two things are very key because those remove two of the biggest conflicts of interest in the finance industry. And so by removing those, that's where I felt the best about going into the field of finance. But yeah, it was a process. And you
What
mentioned,
about that? Is exactly, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is about that fiduciary responsibility and how so many financial planners, they work at a brokerage, or they have products that they want to sell. So how do you balance that? How do you wade through it? How do you find somebody like an independent that do you charge for how do financial planners get paid for performance, for just on that by the hour? How's that work?
yep,
Mm.
yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. You asked a lot of good questions. So, yeah, just for the consumer, I always say like buyer beware. And this is certainly a something where I think the consumer of financial advice needs to be aware because I think that if someone says I'm a financial advisor, first off, that title is not regulated. So people can kind of call themselves a financial advisor, but be an insurance salesman, or they could be, they could work for a broker dealer and maybe they have their license to sell securities or their license to sell insurance, but they're not an investment advisor. And so there's all these really old rules that go back to the Investment Advisor Act of 1940, actually. So in the 1940s, mutual funds became a thing. And that's when you had advisors starting to sell mutual funds for commissions. And, back in the 40s, that was probably the best way to do that, the most efficient way to do that. So the fiduciary rule was put out that an investment advisor has to act in their client's best interest. Now, that sounds really good, except that part of the fiduciary requirement is that if you recommend a subpar product, so say I have investment A and investment B for you. Investment A, by most objective standards, is the best investment. It's, likely to perform higher, it has a lower fee, and I don't get a commission for it. But investment B, I do get a small commission for it, or it's an investment that the fund company that makes that fund kind of pressures my company to sell more of because we have a relationship and they basically give us deals or they fund us. And so to be a fiduciary, I would say the true fiduciary should say, Aaron, I think investment A is by far and away the strongest investment option for you. I recommend you invest in option A. Well, the fiduciary standard would say, Aaron, I think investment A could be the best option for you, has, potentially higher return, lower expenses for sure. But investment B, there's a chance it could have a higher return. But if it also has higher expenses, and if you do invest in it, I'll get a commission. As long as I disclose all those things, I've met the fiduciary standard. And now if you choose B, I'm clear. So that's one way I've actually heard of people ending up in what I believe to be subpar investment strategies because their advisor did actually meet the fiduciary standard just by disclosing the conflicts of interest. And then because people feel, I think, a pressure or an obligation to go with their advisor, they choose the commission product. And so that's where fee only comes in. Though I don't know how into the weeds you want to get on this, but Series 65 and Series 66 exams, Those are the tests to become an investment advisor. And then beyond that, there's the certified financial planner designation, which is the
Mhm.
highest recognized certification in the financial advice industry. And so those, being an investment advisor and being a CFP, those have a very strong fiduciary requirement. But again, all you have to do is disclose your conflicts of interest. So that's how you can have people who do that plus sell commission products, whether it be insurance or investments. On the other side of that, you have people. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going
You
to
have a question?
ask. Yeah, I was going to ask you, as a financial planner, does that also encapsulate an investment advisor role, or are they two separate paths? So you said the highest
Yep.
level, is it just more so financial plan? What I'm getting at is, as a certified financial planner, uh, would you be able to or recommend certain investments, or is it more of a foundational thing where you set up the plan and then you know what I'm saying, more
Yep.
guidance rather than
Yeah. So that's a great question. So yeah, financial planning is all encompassing. And when you become a certified financial planner, you're expected to provide what's called comprehensive financial planning. And again, we're getting pretty into the weeds, but I think this is really good stuff for people to know. But back in the day, advisors would typically only sell insurance and sell investments, but they wouldn't talk to you about taxes. They wouldn't talk to you about real estate. They wouldn't talk to you about, reducing your risk or potentially even any type of entity structure if you were a small business owner or retirement plans. They would literally just sell you investments or insurance. And those are called brokers. So there's a way to tell. So there's financial advisors who are investment advisors, and then there's financial advisors who are brokers. Brokers do not have a fiduciary requirement. So brokers are able to sell people the subpar product, but basically as long as it meets what we call the suitability standard, like it's not, you can't sell like Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, right? But I could sell Aaron the product that, gets me the biggest commission. And as long as it is suitable for your needs, I've checked the box and I'm good to go and no regulator will get on me. So broker dealers have a much lower level of, I would say, service and standard. They are not fiduciaries. Most of them will not sign a fiduciary oath. If you were to bring one to them, they would refuse to sign it because they can't, because they're brokers. So I always look for financial advisors or financial planners, and I use that term synonymously. Financial and financial planning, to me, those are about the same. I refer to myself as both, but I try to refer to myself mostly as a financial planner because I believe the biggest benefit is in the planning process and the ongoing process. But yes, financial planners do help manage investments. So for example, like the services I provide are investment management. If people want it, I do that optionally. I also offer investment planning or just investment advice if people want to DIY their investments, but they want my guidance or my portfolio to implement on their own. And so, we do, so comprehensive financial planning would be, investments, risk mitigation, whether that be through insurance or entity structure or, other types of things like that. Um, Definitely insurance planning, tax planning, I think is critical. College planning, any type of savings or investing, cash flow planning, kind of making sure people have enough liquid reserves to cover whatever short term needs they would have. And then, if I'm managing their investments, then I can kind of manage their short term cash flow needs because I have their investments as well. And then deciding on the most tax efficient way to refund, their, not maybe refund isn't the best word, but refill their liquid reserves that they need. So yes, financial planners definitely do everything. It just depends on the service model. So I think the other question you were getting at is how do financial planners get paid? So there's a lot of debate within the financial advising world, and I feel like it's kind of different groups trying to eat each other. Um, There's the assets under management fee, which is typically like 0.85% to 1.5% assets under management. That is the oldest, most traditional, most familiar payment method for financial advice and investment management. I would say the downsides of that method are that people are charging for investment management, and therefore they emphasize investment management, and they do very little financial planning. Now, that's not a blanket statement. That's not true of everyone. I know some people who charge AUM who do an excellent job with comprehensive financial planning. But I think the tendency is that once you get someone's assets, it's really easy to just charge 1% in an ongoing manner and do very minimal financial planning. So I didn't like that model. That wasn't my preference, and I would never do that myself, for full
Mm.
disclosure. But that's my bias. So I'm not saying it's wrong. But what stuck out to me was more of a fee for service model because I felt like it made more sense. So the analogy I use is if I take my car to Walmart to change the oil, I pull up to the line. There's three options. I can get the $39.99 option, the $49.99 option, or the $59.99 option. I read the descriptions of each and I choose whatever I want to do, right? I know exactly what I'm getting. I know if I go lower, I might be getting a lower quality oil. I know if I go higher, I might get a higher quality oil, but I also wonder if it makes a difference, you know? And so I don't know. So I just make my choice, but I know what I'm going to pay when I pull in there. That's what made the most sense to me. So I set my firm up as a flat fee firm. So I charge a, I offer a range of services and I try to charge a flat fee that makes sense to the clients where they are. And
Mhm.
so I would say a true flat fee firm would just slap like, I don't know, we'll just say $6,000 on their website, and you go to their website and you're like, okay, I get all this stuff. It's an annual fee of $6,000. That's way too expensive. Or you could say that makes sense because I know my assets are going to grow. And at some point, I'm going to be getting a huge value by being with that firm versus the 1% assets under management. If you go up to $1 million, now you're paying 10 grand a year. So the fee structures really kind of depend on the client and what they have, what they want, and then just the
Mhm.
value that they're looking for. So, again, if you're looking for really good comprehensive financial planning, I do think someone that has the CFP designation or chartered financial consultant, that's kind of the other good one for comprehensive planning. If they have one of those two, you'll probably get good comprehensive planning and investment management. If you only care about investments, there's some firms that just take investments. All they do is investments. They don't do any planning, and they tend to just charge like a 1% or, even higher assets under management fee.
Hmm.
So yeah, and then you mentioned hourly. There is an option too for hourly, where some advisors will, they'll just have like a $250 to $500 hourly fee or so, and then people can just meet with them, ask a few questions, and then go. So there's the entire spectrum of fee structures out there, and there's a huge
That's,
range of flat fees available for people.
it sounds like the definitions in the titles can definitely get murky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, of course, you have to be smart on walking through the door, so to speak,
Yep.
on what they're capable of, what they're supposed to be knowledgeable of,
Yep.
and uh, how they're compensated.
Yep. And I think if I can share a quick example, I think the most confusing thing is when you walk into some of these firms that are dual registered. So dual registered means the firm is registered as a broker dealer and as an investment advisor. So the people that they hire, the advisors that they hire, on their right hand, they have a fiduciary standard. In their left hand, they have the suitability standard. And which one comes into play can change. And so, yeah, it can be very, very confusing. So I generally too recommend being careful about firms that are dual registered because it can kind of look like a bait and switch where they say we're fiduciaries. And it's true that their advice is fiduciary, but their products are suitable. And that's a difference. That's where I've seen probably
Mhm.
the most people, I think, get confused and think they're working with a fiduciary. And technically they are, but they're getting suitability results. And so that's, I think the first question I would ask if I were a consumer is, are you a fiduciary or do you work under the suitability standard? And if they hesitate, or if they say, well, both, or I'm under the suitability standard, but I always do what's in my client's best interest, I would just thank them for their time and go. But that's my bias.
Yeah, that might have been part of the reason I went into real estate investing, because I remember stepping into one of those dual register
Yeah.
brokerages. I won't name names, but
Yeah.
I sat down and I said, here's what I want to do. And I've been reading all of the Buffett books and all of the value investing books, and I had stocks in mind, individual stocks, mutual funds, the ETFs, all of that. I was ready, and I stepped in there, and they said, here are the two paths you can go. Here are two options, and here's how we're going to charge you. And I said, well, my plan doesn't fit in either of those options. So, and that was all they could advise me on. And I said, okay. I still invest in stocks and bonds, and I still invest in paper. So, but I do that on my own. But that's why I transitioned over to real estate, because I like having a little extra control. I like having decision power. But I really appreciate the examples, the explanation. When it comes to financial planning, like actually from the customer, from the one that needs the plan, from that perspective, there's so many options. Like I said, from what we could find on Robinhood, that are just 3-letter or 4-letter codes, and it seems like there's an infinite number of choices and things to study, but then there's also, like I said, real estate and other things that are not sold at a stock brokerage. And then there are your income and where to put tax shelter, tax deferred, tax-free type options. What kind of retirement accounts, or the education savings accounts, or all health savings plans. There are so many options out there. And it seems like when you have a certain question about what should I do, one advisor says, well, you got to talk to that advisor. Like, a lot of times in real estate, I have a question about taxes, and I ask your attorney, you got to talk to your CPA. And I'll ask my CPA, and the CPA will say, you got to talk to your attorney. And I talk to a financial planner or advisor or a consultant or investment advisor, and they're like, I don't know.
Find someone who specializes in that. Get that good one person on your team.
And just try to have all of those people in the same room having the same conversation at the same time, without without like $2 million ready to invest. You know what I mean? So with a certified financial planner, could somebody who doesn't know where to get started, could they set up that retirement account, that plan for their kids, the college account, and really, make sure that if they're, going to be an entrepreneur, if they're going to be, if they're going to work a W-2 or 1099 or whatever, how to keep as much of that money as they possibly can through the right investments, right? By putting the money in the right places. And so is that what a certified financial planner can do?
It's what they can do. The challenge is finding one that specializes in the area that you want to get help in. So one of the groups that I'm part of as a financial advisor is called XY Planning Network, and it's a firm. It's not a firm actually. It's a company that helps fee-only independent firms launch their own. We call it registered investment advisory firm. And so XY Planning Network helps me launch my independent firm because they do a lot of the compliance and regulatory stuff that I don't know and I don't want to deal with. So I hire them, they do it for me. And then, now I can hang my shingle and I can serve clients because they helped. And so what I tend to look for and what they're big on is developing a niche because their thing is, great, you went through the CFP education, but now you know all the general stuff about the whole world of finance. And honestly, I didn't love all the CFP education. There was parts of it that fascinated me, like tax and investing, and some of the insurance stuff was actually pretty interesting on how to use it and
Mm-hmm.
mitigate risk. But what I didn't learn much about real estate at all, like hardly any. And so I've had to go find all that education on my own. And fortunately, I have found some great networks and communities to be in for that. But I think if someone is looking to do something specific and they think perhaps like tax strategy, tax planning, or some type of investing, whether real estate or stocks, I think there's an advisor out there for everyone that has that niche and that expertise. But what I will say, just because you're a real estate investor, and I assume many of the people listening to this podcast probably invest in real estate, there's about 2,500 advisors in that XY network. There's about 10 to 15 of us that focus on real estate. It is such a small niche.
Hmm.
Actually, when I launched my firm, I did this awesome program through the VA, and they paired me up with a mentor. And my mentor was a financial advisor out of California. And what I told him that my niche was that I wanted to help people achieve financial independence through real estate investing. He was like, Dan, I got to be honest with you. That sounds great. That's a terrible idea as an advisor. He's like, real estate investors hate advisors. And he's like, they'll never put their money with you. They'll never, they always want to buy another property. They always want to do something else. And, they tend to be DIYers. And he's like, you're just not going to make it. And I was like, well, but that's why I'm fee only. So I don't sell them anything. And that's why I'm flat fee. So they just pay me for my service and I advise on all of it. And I can give tax planning strategy to them. And he was like, oh, well, that makes sense because they do tend to want advisors, but they don't want to give the advisors all their money to manage. And so, there's a niche for everything. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's, just as a maybe, I don't know if this is a funny example or not, so I won't say it is, but, there's an advisor I know who works with female strippers. That's how specific she gets. And so anyone who wants to take their stripping tips and turn it into a retirement account, that's the girl to go to do that. So I think that there's a niche for everything. But again, if you're a consumer, I think you need to find the advisor that has the most expertise and experience in your niche, what you're trying to do. And then you've got to make sure that their fee structure makes sense with where you currently are and where you want to go. So that's a very long answer to that question.
So I'm glad to hear that there are specialists within,
Yep.
because while it's good to be a generalist, and know a little bit about a whole lot of things, or even a lot about quite a few things, but to be able to specialize. I'm surprised though. I mean, I'm not surprised about the attitude in real estate versus the stock market, because that's like a rivalry between Ohio State and Michigan.
Yep.
But
We don't need
to say that it's a bad idea is interesting, because even if you're literally in the title, an advisor, right? And it sounds like that person was coming from a broker point of view, not going to buy what you advise them to buy, rather than that from them, rather than Yeah, rather than simply taking advice on a proper course, right? The plan,
Yep.
not the product.
Yeah.
Anyways, why did you choose real estate? To invest in, to advise them?
Honestly, because it's what I had become the most passionate about and what I wanted to learn about the most for myself. So maybe a little bit of a selfish motivation there, but I've learned so much and it's helped my own real estate investing. And then obviously I can add that value to my clients. But yeah, I got into real estate. I started learning about real estate when we were stationed at Germany. It was kind of funny. My car battery died at one point, and when I replaced the battery, the radio wouldn't turn on because I bought some old beater just to drive back and forth to work. And so the radio wouldn't work. And so I started listening to Bigger Pockets. And that was maybe back in like 2018 or 2017. And so I went from being, this sounds too good to be true, because I was always very conservative with my money. I was always an aggressive stock investor because I understood that and that made sense to me. But I was not as well versed with real estate. And, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, just like everyone else. It made sense, but he made it sound a little too good to be true, I thought. And I was just too conservative for that. Plus, I graduated from college in 2006, and we all know what happened or was starting to happen in 2006. And then when I joined the military in 2010, I'd met people who owned, 3 to 4 houses that were underwater on all of them, and they were struggling to get by. So I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth about real estate. And my philosophy was always, I will rent cheap and invest everything else. And so I went from being a skeptic to being like, this sounds pretty good, actually, to being like, this makes sense, to being like, man, I have to do this. Like, and part of what made sense to me that made me have to do it was the tax strategy piece. And so I was like, I need to keep learning as much about taxes as I can. And now becoming a financial planner, that actually opens doors into more courses and, more avenues to get like good official, tax education. And so, yeah, I just loved it. But that's what opened the door for me. So when we were in Germany, ironically, I was afraid of being a long distance landlord. So I was like, I'll wait till we move back to the States. And then we moved back to the States to Colorado. And I started looking around and I was like, well, I'm going to start looking in Ohio. So that's how I got to invest in Ohio. So I am a long distance landlord now, but
So
it's been great.
I've heard it called the $1 million Venn diagram, where you overlay your interests and your skills. So you've got the interest in and knowledge in financial planning, and the interest and knowledge in real estate, and overlaying that you found a niche that is underserved. So that sounds excellent. I think you're going to do really well.
I appreciate it.
Go on. I cut you off a little bit.
Oh, I think I was pretty much done.
Well,
Yeah, there-
so you started investing in real estate in Ohio, same place my wife and I started
yep.
investing. But we bought a single family fixer upper to rent out in Burr, and you went a different direction with apartment buildings, didn't you?
Yeah. So, we have been saving up and we were very blessed to be in a very strong financial position when we exited the military. And so I had been most intrigued by and drawn to multifamily. So I should say too, I guess our first real estate investment was actually a syndication. It was through a well-established GP team, and it was a pretty cool one. It was about 640 units, and it was 5 apartment complexes in 2 different cities that they already had apartment complexes in. I think in each of those cities, that team already managed over 1,000 units in each. And so it was very well established. They had all the pieces in place. And I liked the idea of diversity by state and city and, just different complexes. And so I did that first, and that kind of got my feet wet a little bit. I was like, okay, this is how it works. And I learned a lot about multifamily from their process. And
Mm-hmm.
then another thing that helped is I got on I'll just say Ken McElroy's email list and his syndication, investor list. And I just have learned so much from reading all his deals that he puts out and watching a lot of his, videos. But what I really learned is if Ken and these other guys are doing this, like I should be looking at this on the same level. So I was doing that. And then I started looking in Ohio for a little bit better cash flow and appreciation combination. And I did find a multifamily building. It was in a smaller town, about 30 to 40 minutes north of Columbus, and it had 9 units that were about rentable and livable. And then there was room for what I thought was 4 more. I've now found out we're only going to do 3 more units. So I'm basically burring the multifamily up to a 12 unit building. And then my plan is to, at some point, have an exit on it. Probably cash out refi would be preferable because it cash flows like crazy. And I own it outright right now. So it's cash flows great. The return on equity is not so great. But I would like to take that when it's finished, hopefully this fall, and then just repeat the process with all the lessons I've learned. But yeah, I think the biggest lesson I've learned jumping into multifamily is, one, I think people think real estate is linear. Like you start out with a single family, move to a duplex, move to a fourplex, move to, a 10 unit, move to 20 unit. But I think depending on what your interest is and your expertise, just go for what you are most intrigued by and what you have the financial ability to do. I would recommend starting a touch smaller than what you could potentially do because you're definitely going to learn lessons, and these lessons have dollar signs on them. And so my goal is to obviously try to help people not make those expensive lessons, but really to do things as prudently as we can to try to minimize those. But, you always are learning something new. But yeah, so I went straight into that multifamily. And then after that, I actually bought another single family, but in Texas. And I bought in that market when it was going up in Austin. And I've bird that property and it's rented out now. And I'll probably exit that probably next year is my goal. So I've done a little bit of both, but I really am wanting to go back to multifamily. And so that's where I see the most value and what makes the most sense to me. So, and I just like it. So I'm going to just kind of make that my niche and go for that.
That what you said about learning some lessons, that's is often code for losing money.
Yep.
I love it. And how does the CFP side of, how does that's got to rub you the wrong way when, as an advisor, as a planner, and you, like risk, right?
Yep.
You want to be, always risk averse. It's like a doctor who doesn't want you to take the experimental protocols, and
Right.
in fact, it wants to do it the safe, tried and true way, by in something that's stable. But we did something that was, quote unquote, risky. So the two sides of it might have been at odds there.
Yeah.
Was it about the potential upside, or was it just the more adventurous side of you muting the arguments?
I mean, it was definitely a combination of everything. Yeah, I've always struggled with being cheap. And so my whole life I've been just a cheap guy. That's why I've had a high savings and investing rate, right? So I think I was cheap, not frugal. Now my goal is to be frugal and not cheap. And that's a good thing to learn. And I think I'm doing better at that. But having said that and applying it to multifamily, yeah, like I did take a lot of risk by doing that. But I think the ways I mitigated risk was, one, I didn't spend more than what I could afford to lose. And so if I were to be, coaching someone on this, I would honestly encourage them not to spend more than what they can afford to lose. I never think they're going to lose 100%, but I just want to make sure that just in case, because there are those rare circumstances where something like could go crazy or there could be a lawsuit or whatever it is. I just want to make sure that they don't put too much capital at risk that jeopardizes their financial plans or their family. And so this is part of that risk mitigation of comprehensive financial planning, right? So I want them to go into it as informed and prepared as possible. And then, like you said, though, financially, it seems like there would be conflicts, but really, I think I care about returns so much that I'm very specific on my underwriting and analysis process.
Mhm.
So I make sure I account for things, and then I try not to be too conservative, but I account for a little bit extra, and that works. It makes the pool of possible investments much smaller. But when something pops up that fits my buy right criteria, all of a sudden I know it's something worth looking at. And so I like that. So I feel like that mitigates risk. And then I control, like you like real estate, I like it for the control as well. I'm renovating these units. I'm getting a different type of tenant in there now than what was there before. The rents are going up. Um, my insurance has gone up drastically, but I've also raised the value of the property significantly. So I've had to up it to cover that. And so I just view there's compensated risk and uncompensated risk. And this is a stock market investing concept. Uncompensated risk is what we might say is like gambling in the stock market, like picking stocks, hoping it goes up when we know long term the odds are stacked against you. Compensated risk is more like passive index investing. I'm going to buy a diversified portfolio of index funds, and I am expecting market beta to happen, which is basically the movement of the market over time naturally. I'm expecting my portfolio to move slightly different than market beta because I have certain tilts in there that I've put in, but I'm taking mostly compensated risk rather than uncompensated. So when I apply that to real estate, for me, uncompensated could be maybe someone doing exactly what I did, but they're like, hey, I heard multifamily's great. I'm buying it and I'm just going to see. That's uncompensated risk. For me, I was like, this is my worst case scenario. This is kind of my 25th percentile scenario. This is my median scenario. This is my 75th
Mhm.
percentile scenario. And this is my I hit a grand slam scenario. And honestly, I think I'm somewhere between 50 and 75th percent scenario on this so far. So it's not as good as I thought it could have been. It's also not nearly as bad as what I planned that it could have been. And I took acceptable amount of risk. Just like in the military, we do a risk assessment form. And, I think you just have to have all new investors, especially, need to take that type of approach. I think some of the worst advice I've heard in the real estate world is just buy a property. For all the people I know who have, just buy, hold it for the long term. You won't regret it. I've seen some pretty crappy outcomes from that. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think if you're going to buy, you got to buy smart.
there are there's a difference between risk and speculation.
Very
So
much.
yeah, that's risk can be calculated, and you can be educated and experienced enough
Yep.
to mitigate the risk. And risk is something maybe unforeseen, but if you do your homework on the front and you're diligent through the underwriting and whatever project, and through the life of the investment, then it's not risky. There is always going to be a certain level of risk, but that's where I think people, uh, especially those who don't invest in real estate or don't invest at all, uh, they're like, "Ooh, that's risky." Well, and for you, that's scary. Speculation is when you're gambling, when you just buy.
Absolutely.
So
If you're
you're
long-term game,
hoping that it goes up.
right. Yeah, I was going to say if your long-term game plan is that inflation happens and your property just rises in line with inflation, then you're getting a net 0% return. And that's not an awesome investment.
That's one of my favorite things about real estate, though, is that level of control. And that's why I think it's less risky because when and this is just my personal bias, but when you buy, say, a stock or ETF, mutual fund, whatever it is, online, your influence over that more or less ends once you buy, once you put in that
Yep.
order. You can do all the homework you want on the company or the fund manager you want, but then once you purchased it, you just gotta wait, and it's time and hope that it goes up. Whereas you gotta do your homework on the front end with real estate before you buy the right property, but then you so limitless options for what to do with that property after you purchase it to maximize your return. And I love that amount of that ability, that agency in
Yep.
your future. For example, we purchased a single family house, and we bought it, and it needed a lot of fixing up. So we forced appreciation into it after we bought it by adding value into it,
Yep.
making it, more or less new, putting all the new stuff in there. And then we had the option of making it a long-term rental, a mid-term rental, short-term rental. And the level of management work that's involved definitely is different and goes up, but we turn it into a short-term rental. And if it didn't work out, or if something changed, we can change our methodology, and we can turn it into a
Yep.
mid-term rental or long-term. We can adjust according to the market or other conditions.
Absolutely. And I think that having multiple exit strategies is one of the smartest ways to invest. For me, that's one of the ways you compensate for that risk and you make sure you buy right.
But the real risk is in your knowledge and your abilities. I think
Yep.
that's what you know and what you don't know. So if you've done your homework and you found a niche and you specialize and you get really good at that specialty. It's good again, good to be a generalist. You get strong in that one specialty, and then you're well on your way to mitigating any risk.
Yep. And it's been said, concentration builds wealth, diversification keeps it. And that's kind of more of a stock investing quote, but I do like it. And I think that real estate, it's applicable there too. So I do think, I think there's some advisors I've talked to before, and they're like, oh, if you have a multifamily building, then you should have a short-term rental and a single family home and like a fourplex and a syndication and like all this different stuff. And it's like, actually, that will probably hurt your returns long term. You should probably go all in what you know and do the best job you can. And if at some point you hit that point of, whether you want to call it financial independence or freedom or, just I'm tired and it's retirement and it's time to travel for 3 to 6 months of the year, like at that point, there are other options you can go to that are more passive. And so it's really good to be able to have those different strategies. But I think, like you're saying, like knowledge is key. Robert Kiyosaki has a great quote I love. He says, education is cheap, experience is expensive. And I feel like that's a lesson I've had to learn over and over in my life until I finally got smart and was like, you know what? I'm going to pay people for their expertise. And it has added so much value to my life and my investment strategies. It's like, yeah, it just makes too much sense and it reduces your risk, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I have another one about experience. Because experience is the worst. Experience is the harshest teacher. It gives you the test first, then the lesson later after.
yes.
So as a certified financial planner, is specializing in real estate. How do you advise someone? Let's say someone is just getting started with their own financial plan, and maybe they're looking to uh, put some money into real estate. Maybe it's somebody who already has a few investments. How do you help them get their plan,
Yeah, that's a
made a
good
plan?
question. Yeah, and this is where I've kind of had to invent the ship as I'm, sailing it because this isn't really a common thing. And one clarification too, just because I feel a little guilty, I am not quite a certified financial planner professional yet. Right now, I'm under a candidate status. So that means I've passed the curriculum, I've passed the exam, but I'm still meeting the experience requirement. So right now, I'm technically like a candidate for CFP, but same education, all that stuff. But yeah, so I would say there's two different people you asked about. The person wanting to start, but they haven't. So what I feel I can add the most value to those people in is helping them avoid making a bad investment that very first time. Mark Twain has a good quote about if a cat touches a hot stove, it'll never touch the hot stove again. The problem is it also won't touch a cold one. And that's where I've seen so many people get burned, and especially in the stock market. I have clients
Mm-hmm.
that invested and lost money in 2008. They've never invested since. They lost out on almost 14 to 15% a year returns in the stock market because of that, getting burned. And so I think the biggest thing is getting some type of personalized real estate investment strategy set up. And that has to be based on, your income, your amount of cash available to invest. And then I think that's where once you kind of know those more objective numbers, then it becomes education on, do you want multifamily? Are we going to house hack? House hacking is the easiest way to start in. So are we going to house hack your way into, a townhouse even or a condo? I've even seen people house hack. And then, or you can move into a duplex or a single family home that you can rent out by the room as well. And then how do we get that first multifamily building? And so just kind of helping people build a roadmap towards that so they can actually logically connect the dot from I'm here today, I'm going to go here. And it's like a staircase, just one step at a time, and you're always moving forward. But we're doing it instead of like trying to step 3 steps at a time. We're making sure we go one at a time. And then just that they're optimizing it tax efficiently. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, I think more people know this now, but if you own your home and you live in it for 2 years, there's some nuances to this, but the general approach is if you own it and live in it for 2 years, you can sell it tax free, right? But what a lot of people don't realize is that if you own it and live in it for 2 years, you can move out, buy a new house, rent out the old house for another 3 years. And as long as you sell it within the next 3 years, you can still get the gain tax free. So basically, you get 3 free years of rent plus 3 free years of appreciation. And you do have to pay back
Mm-hmm.
depreciation recapture. So it's not completely tax free. And depending on some of the losses, some of the rental income may be taxable. But basically, you're drastically increasing the value you can have all tax free. And so that is a strategy. I've seen people, in their first to, we'll say, third deal, especially if they're doing kind of a live in flip strategy or something like that, they can make tremendous tax free gains on real estate that just really kind of like a rocket ship to retirement. It really boosts how soon they can get into that multifamily property, or if they want to invest it, whatever. But yeah, so I try to help people develop a strategy based on what appeals to them, and then just make sure they're doing their underwriting very well, as accurately as possible, and then planning for best case and worst case scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think the hardest part with real estate and stocks, those stocks can be a little more exciting at times. But it's just it is a bit of a waiting game. You can force the appreciation, but if you want to get it tax free as a live and flip, you still got to live in it for 2 years. If you want to do that, hold it for over a year for long term capital gains. That takes time. But I think once people get the ball rolling and that snowball's kind of going downhill and building momentum, then I think it's a little more, it feels like we're doing more. So I enjoy that. But for the people that already have rentals, I think the biggest thing I've seen is they don't know what their return on investment on the rental is. So most people talk cash flow. And my soapbox issue with cash flow is only valid the first year you buy it. After that, it doesn't take into account the time value of money. And so people who focus solely on cash flow tend to not realize that they might have slipped from like a 10% cash on cash return in year one to like a 3% cash on cash return in year 4 or 5. And so, but that's more of a return on equity. And so a lot of people, what I try to help them look at is, well, what's your return on equity? What's your internal rate of return? What is your cash on cash return, just this year? And it's like when you look at all these different returns, it's like looking at, a mountain from 4 different points of view and you see it slightly differently every time. And then I think that can help the investors who own the property either realize, shoot, it's time to 1031 into something else, or maybe I need to do a cash out refi, or maybe I should just sell and I have a better investment opportunity elsewhere. But a lot of people, I think, in real estate, they get stuck in the past and they remember that first year's return and they're like, my property does 12%. And then 6 years later, it's like, well, it's like 3%. And so I've seen that quite a bit. But God help me find a better way to communicate that to the people who just love their property.
That's an interesting point because we were just looking at that. We've got a duplex in Akron that we bought just a few years ago, but we've got about $100,000 in equity in that thing, and we could sell, we could refinance, do a cash out, except I keep looking up the 3.62 interest rate on that thing. I'm like, I don't want to. That's the mortgage itself is an asset, because that's essentially free money.
Yep.
So, I that one property I've been on the fence about for a little while, but
and
then maybe the advisor.
Hey, maybe. Wink, wink. No, I was going to say sometimes too, it really, I want everyone to know what the returns are, but it really comes down to your goals and your needs. And so right now,
it's also got great cash flow, so it definitely could withstand the rate bump. I just, I'm one of those guys. I'm going to hold on to that really awesome, 2019, 2018 interest rate.
Yep.
Anyways, I really appreciate you sharing today, and really given us quite a bit of value, a little info, a lot of chew.
Thank you, Aaron. It's been my pleasure. I'm really glad we're having this discussion. There's so much I want to talk about.
Well, I want to transition into the final segment of the show, the countdown to impact.
Okay.
Now, three quick questions.
Okay.
And it'll be, and I'm still looking at the order here. 3 books or podcasts that have made an impact on you.
Okay.
2 quotes. Or maybe rules of thumb.
Okay.
And 1 person, each of which have made an impact in your life.
Man, those are really good. I think the books will be the easiest one. I would say one of the best books I've ever read is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. That was one of the first books that really made me analyze how I make decisions and start to realize how I have biases that play out in those decisions subconsciously. And so I have really appreciated that book. Very, very good read. And for anyone who doesn't know Daniel Kahneman, he's a psychologist that was awarded the Nobel Prize in economics. That's how big of an impact he had. So amazing book. I think everyone needs to read it, but especially investors, because of those reasons we just talked about. Why would we prefer higher cash flow if our return on equity is still lower than what we could get in, say, bonds? Because bonds won't see you, but real estate could. And so Uh, yeah, Thinking Fast and Slow. 10x is easier than 2x is one of the best books I've read in the past couple of years. That book has been so challenging to me, and I struggle giving up the 80%. And so I've been having to be a lot more intentional about that and trying to think about what that actually looks like, and whether it's something I need to hire out or if it's something I just need to not do. Because the truth is, I waste some time doing some dumb stuff, and there's other stuff I do that I waste time doing that someone would do it better for me. And so that's where I've
Mhm.
started to learn the value of actually paying people for their expertise. Going back to that whole, education is cheap, experience is expensive quote, which I will apply to your quote question in a minute. And then I'd say the third book is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. That book is an amazing book. It's by far a bestseller. And again, it just gets into all the decision makings and how I think a lot of people like to think money and these real estate decisions we're talking about, we treat them like they're objective decisions, like the numbers don't lie. The reality is
Mhm.
our emotions will tell us a story about those numbers that we either want to believe or we don't want to believe. And it is largely our emotions deciding what to do with the numbers we see and how we, tell our heart and tell our mind what to do. And so, yeah, Psychology of Money, Thinking Fast and Slow, and 10x is easier than 2x. And then the next one was two quotes. Was that right?
Two quotes.
Yeah. So again, that experience is cheap or education is cheap, experience is expensive quote. I have found
Yeah.
myself just paying for expertise so much more over the past few years, and it is paid significantly. It is, or paid off significantly. I've learned so much more. I feel way more confident, way more peace of mind that what I'm doing is actually right because I've had someone smarter than me that knows more than me kind of verify what I'm doing and help me do
Mhm.
it even better than what I didn't realize I didn't know. So that's been a really impactful quote. Second quote. I think of Warren Buffett's quote, price is what you pay, value is what you get. That kind of ties into the whole other quote. But I've always liked that. At first, I only applied that to investing. And so I was a very deep value investor. But as I've learned more, I've realized, price is what I pay, the value is what I get. I mean, that helps me not buy like dirt cheap jeans that last, a short while or something. I mean, it's been really good for me. Um,
Mhm.
and then one person, what was it specifically about the one person again? Was there a specific way they influenced you?
One person who has made an impact in your work, in your life.
Hmm. I mean, I would say my wife. I Maybe that sounds like a cop out, but she has just been so good for me in every way. And obviously, I love her, but it's just like the value that she's added to my life and just the joy and stuff. It's been so amazing, and having our little boy and stuff. It's the stuff money can't buy. Like that's what's so deep about that. So I'll say her.
I think that's a perfect pick.
Thanks. I'll tell
Well,
her you said that.
Dan, thank you so much. Once again, I really appreciate sharing your time. If anybody wants to learn more about you, connect with you, talk to you about financial planning, and that, where can they connect?
So my website is cornerstone and then the letters FI for financial independence planning.com. So cornerstonefi.com. You can check out what I share there and see my service and fees and process that we go through. And I'm always glad to just talk with people as well and meet people and try to point them in the right direction. So my goal is to add
All
value to
right.
people.
And we'll make sure we get that in the show notes.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.